The federal government has unveiled its legislation meant to protect children online. It's called the Safe Social Media Act. We were talking about it a little bit earlier. It would mean a social media ban for those under 16 and eventually a new digital regulator to enforce the law. Earlier, I spoke with BC Premier David Eby about the legislation and what more he would like to see. BC Premier David Eby, nice to see you again.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about this because you have talked about it a lot and had very particular expectations around what the federal government would put forward to protect kids online. I want to start not with the ban, but with what the government is planning to do with chatbots, AI chatbots. They are not going to require companies to report interactions to police, whether it's someone expressing ideas of suicide or death. But there is sort of a process where these companies will have to show when they've dealt with things or how they've dealt with things. What do you make of that? Does that go as far as you would like it to?
We have a really straightforward ask from British Columbia, and it's not an abstract ask, and it's not, a theoretical ask. It comes out of the terror and the horror that we saw in Tumbler Ridge and the allegations about OpenAI that followed. Here's a school shooting where families were devastated, children were murdered, and following that event, very serious allegations published in an American national newspaper that OpenAI had a group of people inside the company that knew that this was going to happen, made a strong argument that the company should go to police and report it, and the company chose not to do that. Now, those are really serious allegations. They haven't been proven, but troubling, deeply troubling to us in the province and to the families, and opened up this question of when do these companies report? And what is their level of involvement if a chatbot is involved in a crime like this? They've essentially provided the vehicle by which the murderer, the killer, became more efficient. And so if that is a company's involvement, is there criminal culpability? Is there civil liability? What is the obligation on the company to come forward and report? And what was very clear to us is that the answer was way too uncertain to be accepted. These companies have to have a bright line test imposed on them by the federal government that requires them to bring this information forward, full stop. And someone is using a chatbot to plan a violent crime against others, credibly, the company believes that that is the case, they have to report. Full stop, that should be the law, not a complicated reporting mechanism. And we're going to be pushing the federal government on that. I don't want to say we don't like the bill, we do. There are lots of parts of the bill we like. This is a miss.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the social media ban for Canadians under 16. It's going to take some time to get it all in place, the legislation passed, and then, of course, the regulator to put in place. But did that seem like something that you wanted? Does that go far enough for you on that front?
Yeah, and it's so terrible, but I know that this is the case across the country. We've had horrific cases here as well on these social media apps. We had the case of Carson Cleland, a young boy in Prince George, a incredibly talented young man, was going to go far, had an interaction over a period of about 3 hours with an account on Snapchat, no connection to him, using a cloaked connection through a VPN from Nigeria. And Snapchat allowed that connection to take place for that person to contact Carson. Within 3 hours, the damage was done, and Carson ended up taking his own life. And so, these are devastating stories and underline the importance of this work. And I don't believe the social media companies when they say they don't know that this is happening or they couldn't possibly prevent it. And so fully supportive of the proposal that if these companies refuse to put the safeguards in place, they should not have any access to children, full stop. Also, I am, as a parent, I really don't want my kids on social media. But I also understand that they may or their friends may access less safe alternatives if there's no option, because what we've seen in Australia following their ban. Yeah. So it's a complicated area. I think the federal government on that piece has struck the right balance. And we do have to impose obligations on these companies, as well as recognize that there are some positive aspects to these things when they're safe and protected for kids, and we can deal with issues of bullying and predators and other pieces, which I know we can deal with, but the companies have to be forced to deal with.
Just to go back to the AI chatbots for a moment, I think the government was looking for a way to have some regulations but not interfere with people's privacy? Obviously, I take what you're saying, and everyone wants to avoid tragedy, but do you understand the concerns about getting involved in sort of monitoring and surveying people's actions and their, right to privacy?
Well, I guess if the companies weren't already doing it, then maybe we could have that conversation. But they are doing it.
Sure.
They're using the information you put into the chatbots to train the next generation of chatbots. They're using the information that you put in to prepare the large language models for the next iteration. They're already watching, they're already recording and keeping the information. The allegation is that OpenAI had full awareness of what was going on. They had appropriately flags internally to bring to their attention that this kind of activity was taking place. And so in that environment where the technology exists, allegations are not just that the technology exists, but that it actually flagged the activity and the company was aware, then I think it's appropriate to put the obligation on the company to bring it forward. Why they think that it would be appropriate to have a regime where the flag comes up and then someone unaccountable in a boardroom somewhere whose primary relationship is with shareholders, not with the affected families and victims, why that person should get to make the call instead of the government saying, nope, full stop, you got to let us know. I'm not sure why that argument carries any water with anyone. That's why I think a national standard is required.
Okay, I want to ask you about trade, if I can, because you did have that First Minister's call this week. Donald Trump has said he may not want to go forward with the review of CUSMA, which you called pretty lame. Do you take these threats seriously, that he could not renew, or do you think this is bluster?
I mean, I don't know what to take seriously or not with the president. What we can look at is the broad trends. And the broad trends are that the United States wants to become more insular. They want to impose massive duties on Canadian companies wherever possible. We've seen it particularly in our softwood sector here in British Columbia. And that imposes on us an obligation to face outwards to the rest of the world. I believe very strongly in the argument that I've heard, including from senior members of the federal administration, the Prime Minister, that bad deal is not something that we should take when no deal is available. No deal is okay. We have 85% of our goods that are duty-free between the countries, and we should use this time to diversify away from the United States wherever we can, while recognizing incredibly hard to replace that market. For myself, for example, I'm off to China at the end of the month. I've been in Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, Korea. These are countries that also want to trade with us. We have a huge new deal. I will credit the Prime Minister, a $10 billion deal with Germany around LNG sales from British Columbia through a facility that we're working on with the Nisga'a First Nation. This is the kind of work that we need to be doing together, just given the unreliability and the inconsistency of the messaging coming from the United States.
Okay. David Eby, always nice of you to make the time. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
A new government bill will require social media sites to implement an age restriction for children under 16 years old. It's one aspect of the Liberals' effort to try and make social media safer for kids.
We know that social media can be made safe by design, that these responsibilities are important on platforms, and there are platforms for kids under 15 that can be used responsibly.
Ottawa made the announcement as the Prime Minister heads off to the G7 summit in France, where leaders are expected to discuss AI and protecting children from online harm. Last week, New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt wrote a letter to the Prime Minister asking him to implement this social media ban. I spoke to her earlier. Premier Holt, nice to see you again. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Rosemary.
You're one of a handful of premiers who's been advocating for Ottawa to ban social media for kids under age 16. Why was that something you wanted to see, and what did you make of the way the government presented it?
Well, it's something we wanted to see because the harms have become strikingly clear from doctors, from childcare development experts, from parents, and from students themselves. It's researched, it's measurable. The negative impacts of social media on youth mental health and development and well-being is clear. And look, I'm a mom to a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old. I see it firsthand at home. And we have the tools to act. Other countries have shown us that they can act and see progress. And so why wouldn't we? When the research is clear and the tools are in front of us, if we can protect kids from harm, we should be doing everything we can.
It is going to take a while for this to happen. The law has to pass. The enforcement or the regulator won't happen until later. And I wonder why, whether you think that that's going to be too long. And then, you yourself said you're a parent. How much parents should be participating in this rather than just putting it all on government to regulate these social media apps?
Oh, this absolutely includes parents. And I think as we've seen, though, having these conversations, putting it out in the public, making it clear that everyone agrees this is the way we should go. I know how challenging that could be. We had grade 8 prom last night. My kid's the only kid without a phone there. And it is so hard to hold that line when it is the point of connection between her and her friends. But once one person does it and a second person and a third person, it makes it easier for the next parent to say no. And so we all have a role to play and a responsibility in this, but I think we can support parents by making it clear this is a line, the government's going to act. We can do things tomorrow, right? We can go into our schools tomorrow and disable access to social media sites through the internet that exists in the schools. We don't need legislation to do that. We can put the legislation in place, even if the regulator isn't stood up, and then we can move those regulations in, but we start to socialize the behavior that everyone starts to see these as the cigarettes of 2026, 2027, and we make it socially unacceptable as we make it legally unacceptable. And so there's things we can all do. New Brunswick's ready to do our part on social media, on targeted advertising, on addictive algorithms to keep our kids safe.
So will you do something while you're waiting for this to go into place? Is there something that you're going to move on?
Yeah, look, we're looking at that because, to be honest, we were in a way surprised to see the government move as quickly as they did. We had thought this was coming, but maybe it was coming later, and we're really pleased to see the action this week. On the other hand, we hear the timelines of 18 months, maybe 24 months, and I do think there's things we can do more quickly than that. So that's what New Brunswick is doing now. We're evaluating what the federal government has committed to, what their targets are. We're looking at the tools available to us that would be complementary and supportive, and then we're going to move forward in ways that are focused on kids, parents, and teachers, and the doctors and pediatricians that are telling us this is necessary. Anything we can do will help reduce the cases of anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and risks that youth are experiencing today in this online environment.
I want to ask you a couple questions about trade, if I can, because you did have a First Minister's call with the Prime Minister this week. It sounds like, based on what Dominic LeBlanc is saying, and I know that you're in touch with him regularly, that there is some progress being made at the table, that there were kind of a dozen or so issues where the U.S. could see that Canada was moving. What is your sense about the state of the talks right now?
I think you've summarized it well. We're really pleased that the Prime Minister and Minister LeBlanc have gotten the FMM group together, the First Ministers together, to provide that update. These regular conversations are important because myself and other premiers are engaging with the U.S., with counterparts on a regular basis. We want to make sure that we're staying like a tight Team Canada and working in the same direction. But the progress that Minister LeBlanc has described to us is encouraging, certainly different than what's coming out of President Trump's mouth, but that's no surprise. We want to see the real action on the ground to get the best possible deal for Canada and to know that the steps are moving in the right direction. The timelines, all of us wish it were faster, but we want the right deal, not the fastest deal. So it was encouraging to hear Minister LeBlanc let us know how it's been going with USTR Greer and that we're seeing progress and they're moving forward.
You're one of the provinces where the U.S. booze is off the shelves. That seems to be a real preoccupation for the Americans, the fact that it's off the shelves in large parts of the country. But you also have said that you won't return it to the shelves unless the issue of softwood is dealt with. That to me seems like a pretty high bar, Premier, because the softwood tariffs, as you know, are a long-time irritant through before Trump and long after. I wonder if there are other concessions you'd be willing to make in order to put that back on the shelves to please the Americans as a conciliatory move.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you raising softwood lumber. Rosemary, thank you, because if you hadn't, I would have. That is the biggest impact on New Brunswick's economy, 45% tariffs on one of our largest exports, and an export that's critical to Americans, right? This is the wood that they use to build their homes, and they're experiencing negative impacts because of its price and their access to it. And we have billions of dollars on the table ready to get at this negotiation and solve it. But I agree with you. The timeline on softwood lumber tariffs looks different than the timeline on a Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement. Right. So we will be part of the team. The conversation about booze, and yes, it's an absolute irritant to the Americans, which is what makes it a valuable tool in these negotiations. We'll work with the national team and with our counterparts to make sure we're leveraging that opportunity as best we can. But I have to tell you, Rosie, since taking it off the shelf, I don't think if we put it back on the shelf, it would see a lot of customers, because New Brunswick has excellent craft beer, phenomenal craft alcohol, wines grown here that would surprise you. We're excited to see the direct-to-consumer opportunity finally coming forward so that people in BC and in Manitoba can get access to New Brunswick's delicious craft alcohol products. So I'm not sure if the U.S. is going to see that sector come back, given that certainly New Brunswickers have found Canadian products that are great replacements.
Okay, Premier Holt, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
As mentioned, one of the things in this legislation is regulating social media, a ban for children under the age of 16. That's if platforms don't prove that they have adequate safeguards in place, something they'll be able to try and do. Andrea Chrysanthou is a parent of a 13-year-old son, and she joins me live this morning. Nice to see you, Andrea.
Nice to see you, Rosemary.
What did you think of this idea of a ban on social media for kids under 16?
Yeah, I like the idea that that the government is actually looking at this. How incredible. We weren't even talking about this a few months ago. Sure. So for them to get on it really quickly just shows the swell of support from parents and the frustration of wanting to protect our kids. But I do think the idea of a ban is misunderstood by a lot of parents. I talk with a lot of friends, and we think about, okay, a ban is going to keep our kids off devices. How great. My work here is done as a parent. I don't have to think about this anymore. In Australia, 70% of kids are already back online. And so an outright ban isn't going to work. I appreciate it as a first step, though, and I'm supportive of that.
So if it's not going to work, and you're right, Australia, where they've put it in place, the kids have found ways to get around it. Why does it matter if there is one? Why is it important that there be one if we all understand that it's going to take more than that?
I think it's a first step. I think it needs to be part of negotiations. I think for kids, I liken social media to a bicycle. You're not going to give a bicycle a 10-speed to a 5-year-old, but you are going to give them a bicycle because it's exciting. It's also very dangerous, but you are going to give it to them with training wheels and with a helmet, and you're going to walk next to them as they're riding it. Maybe when they're 8, you take off those training wheels or whatever. So I do think it's appropriate in some circumstances. I think the idea of banning it in schools, absolutely. I think there are some, the endless scrolling, all those sort of things need to be banned. They are turning our kids' brains into mush. And so there is a use for some kind of ban, but an outright ban, and frankly, Rosemary, telling your kid not to do something is the absolute best way to get them to do something behind your back, right?
Yeah. When you're dealing with teens, that's for sure. So can I ask you personally what you're doing with your 13-year-old son? How are you monitoring or policing what he's doing yourself?
Yeah, I think, for a long time I was saying, get off the device, get off the device. He's an only child. My 2 older kids are much older, so he, for lack of a better term, is an only child. Yeah. So he uses it to interact with other kids his age, especially, in the winter in Canada, they're not outside. But I think it was explaining to him, sitting down with him and saying, look, this is what's happening to your brain. When he was deregulating and he would have, attacks in the middle of a conversation and wouldn't be able to regulate himself. And I'd be like, okay, do you understand that this is where this is coming from? And Rosemary, can I tell you, last week there was, he's pulled out his Legos for the first time and he's playing with Legos by himself. It's just, the switch was in him where he was like, you know what? I'm hearing from other people. I'm hearing from reliable sources, not just my mom saying, get off the device because it's not good for you.
Yeah.
And he's finally realizing, okay, regulating now. So that has been a godsend.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder too if just being able to say the government's going to ban this for kids under 16, whether that makes a difference. Like, so it's not just you saying it.
Yeah, I think, and I've heard other people say the support of having other kids also not be allowed on it, the support of like, ooh, this is illegal for a reason, the same way that they're learning in school about tobacco and alcohol. Like, okay, now we're going to learn about social media. But I do think, we talk about as parents that idea of banning, but I also really want responsibility. And I want to make sure that for those kids who do end up back online, that they are protected. And it worries me that, there are going to be no guardrails if kids are banned from social media.
It's going to take a while to get this in place. You have to sift through the legislation, and then it passes, and then the regulator. It's possible your kid will be close to 16 by the time it's all working. So you'll have to keep policing a little longer, I think.
Yeah, and listen, and we all have to take that accountability, but I also, implore on the government and implore on policymakers and others to have some grace for parents. We are dealing with so much. On top of that, to have to, to put it on us to be like, make sure your child isn't online. It's like, we need that support. So I think a little bit of the ban is great, but also education, also support in schools, all those sort of things so that we can all be on the same page.
Not having a phone, was that ever something you thought about?
I think it's great for a lot of kids. I have to say, maybe I've made the wrong decision. He does have a phone, but he comes from a single parent family. So I just need to know where he is. And I can track him, and I can, and have I gone down I think I went down the road, too far, and now I'm making up for it. But it's also with having a conversation and treating him as someone who has a brain and who has agency and can decide for himself, rather than telling him not to. I tell you, any kid who has come to my house who's been told not to at their house comes to my house and is like, can I sneak in a phone? Or can I play on the device? And it's like, we can't just tell our kids don't do something. We have to have meaningful conversations and say, hey guys, this is what's happening. This is why it's happening. Do you see it happening? And I think when they have enough agency and they can say, I choose not to do this because it's unhealthy, then when they choose it, it lasts longer.
Listen, you don't need to hear this from me, but it sounds like you're doing a great job. So thank you for talking to us. Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Andrea Chrysanthou. Nice to meet you. Appreciate taking the time this morning.
Likewise. Take care.